The air in Grandma Rose's house always held the same scent, a delicate, layered perfume of a life well lived. It was a blend of dried lavender from the sachets she tucked into every drawer, the faint, sweet smell of old paper and leather from her library, and the lingering ghost of the lemon polish she used on the dark, heavy wood of the furniture. After she passed, a new scent joined the mix, the sterile, cloying aroma of funeral lilies, a smell of grief that clung to the velvet curtains and settled deep into the plush, worn carpets. I was sitting in her favorite armchair, its faded chintz fabric soft against my cheek, the coolness of the leather-bound book in my lap doing little to soothe the heat of the tears that had dried on my skin. The house was quiet, a deep, profound silence that felt heavier than any sound. It was the quiet of absence. The silence was shattered by the sharp, decisive click of a key in the front door lock. The sound was jarring, an intrusion. I sat up, my heart giving a nervous little flutter against my ribs. The heavy oak door swung open, and the muted afternoon light from the porch was momentarily blocked by a silhouette. My cousin Jenna. She stepped inside, bringing with her a gust of cool autumn air and the scent of expensive, sharp perfume that immediately did battle with the softer smells of the house. Her heels made a series of loud, confident clicks on the polished hardwood of the foyer, a sound that seemed to announce her ownership of the space. "Elara? Honey, you're just sitting in the dark?" Her voice was smooth, like honey laced with a sliver of ice. I hadn't realized how dim the room had become as the sun had begun to set. The light filtering through the lace curtains was a dusty gold, painting long shadows on the floor. "Just thinking," I murmured, my own voice feeling thick and unused. Jenna flicked a switch, and the overhead chandelier burst to life, its crystal teardrops scattering a harsh, bright light that made me wince. The room, which had felt like a soft, quiet cocoon, was suddenly exposed, every speck of dust in the air illuminated. "Well, no more of that," she said, her tone breezy and dismissive. She moved through the living room with a proprietary air, her manicured fingers trailing over the back of the sofa, straightening a picture frame that was already perfectly straight. "We have so much to do. The lawyer called. We need to get the estate settled. That means going through everything. Everything." The word hung in the air between us. Everything meant 96 years of a life, packed into chests and closets and boxes in the attic. It meant love letters tied in faded blue ribbon, photographs with curled edges, recipes written in a looping, elegant script. It wasn't just stuff. It was the physical remainder of the person we had both loved, the woman who had raised us more like sisters than cousins after my own mother passed. The first incident was small, so small I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. We were in the attic, the air thick with the smell of cedar and thyme. A single bare bulb cast a weak, yellowy glow, making the shadows in the corners dance and writhe. I had found Grandma's old jewelry box, a heavy mahogany case with a mother-of-pearl inlay. My hands were trembling as I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on worn red velvet, was her favorite locket, a simple silver oval. "I remember this," I whispered, the sound swallowed by the vast, quiet space. I traced the engraving on the front, a delicate R for rose. She never took it off. Jenna was across the attic, sifting through a trunk of old clothes, the rustle of fabric a constant, restless sound. "Oh, that's lovely, sweetie," she said, her voice slightly distracted. I closed the box, the tiny clasp making a soft click, and placed it carefully on a small, sturdy table next to me, planning to take it downstairs later. We worked for another hour, the dust motes swirling in the light around us, and when we were done, I went to pick up the jewelry box. It was gone. My breath hitched. "Jenna, did you see the jewelry box? The one with the locket?" She turned, a look of mild confusion on her perfectly made-up face. "What box, honey?" "The mahogany one. I just had it. I put it right here on this table." My voice was rising, a note of panic creeping in. Jenna walked over, her movements slow and deliberate. She scanned the empty tabletop, her brow furrowed in a performance of deep thought. "Elara, there hasn't been a box on this table the whole time we've been up here. Are you sure you didn't put it somewhere else? Maybe you put it in one of these trunks by mistake." "No," I said, my voice firm. "I'm positive. I put it right here." The wood of the table was cool and smooth under my searching fingertips. It was undeniably empty. She gave a small, sad sigh, the kind of sound one makes when dealing with a difficult child. She placed a cool hand on my arm. Her touch felt less like comfort and more like a restraint. "Sweetie, you've been under so much stress. Grief does strange things to a person's memory. It's completely normal. We'll find it. Don't you worry your pretty little head about it. I let her lead me downstairs, a cold knot of confusion and frustration tightening in my stomach. I knew what I had seen. I knew what I had touched. But her certainty was like a wave, slowly eroding the shores of my own. Later that evening, she found it. It was tucked inside a dusty ceramic vase in the dining room, a place I would never, in a million years, have put it. See, she'd said, holding it out to me with a triumphant, pitying smile. You're just not thinking straight. It's okay. I'm here to help you. That was how it started. A slow, methodical poisoning of my own reality. She was my cousin, my family. I had no reason not to trust her. The days bled into weeks. We worked through the house, a project that felt both sacred and agonizing. And with each passing day, the strange little incidents piled up. Keys I was certain I had left on the hook by the door would turn up in the refrigerator, nestled beside the milk. Important documents for the lawyer that I had placed neatly on the desk in the study would vanish, only for Jenna to find them misfiled in a cookbook in the kitchen. Each time, her reaction was the same. A theatrical sigh, a gentle, condescending touch, a soothing murmur about stress and grief, and how my mind was playing tricks on me. She began to use the word forgetful a lot. Then she graduated to confused. One Tuesday afternoon, the appraiser was coming. A man named Mr. Henderson. I had spoken to him on the phone myself the day before, the sound of his gruff but kind voice still clear in my memory. We were selling off some of the antique furniture we both agreed we had no room for, and I had arranged for him to arrive at 2 o'clock. I spent the morning cleaning the silver, the familiar metallic scent of the polish on my hands, the rhythmic motion of the cloth a small comfort. At 1:45, I found Jenna in the garden, snipping the last of the autumn roses. The air was crisp, and the scent of damp earth and dying leaves was thick around us. Mr. Henderson will be here in about 15 minutes, I said, pulling my cardigan tighter around my shoulders. Jenna looked up, a perfect picture of innocence, her shears poised mid-snip. Mr. Who, sweetie? My stomach dropped. The appraiser. Mr. Henderson. We talked about it last night, remember? He's coming to look at the grandfather clock and the dining set. She tilted her head, her expression one of deep, loving concern. Oh, Elara. Honey, no. We didn't have that conversation. I think you must have dreamt it. I would have remembered something like that. No, I didn't dream it, I insisted, the frustration making my voice shake. I spoke to him. I wrote it on the calendar in the kitchen. I just looked at the calendar this morning, she said, her voice patient, soothing. There's nothing written down for today. I turned and practically ran back into the house, my sneakers silent on the thick grass. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I burst into the kitchen, the familiar scent of coffee and cinnamon a strange contrast to the panic churning inside me. I yanked the calendar off the wall. The box for Tuesday, October 12th, was completely, starkly blank. The note I had written in my own clear, block letters, appraiser, 2 p.m., was gone. It was as if it had never been there. The doorbell chimed, a cheerful, 2-note sound that made me jump. Through the beveled glass of the front door, I could see the silhouette of a man. Mr. Henderson. Jenna came inside, wiping her hands on a small towel. She gave me that same sad, gentle smile. Who on earth could that be? She wondered aloud, as if it were the greatest mystery in the world. The meeting was a disaster. I tried to explain, but my words came out in a jumbled, desperate rush. Jenna stood beside me, a pillar of calm capability, apologizing to the bewildered Mr. Henderson for the mix-up. She kept patting my arm, telling him, "My cousin has been under a terrible strain since our grandmother passed. She's been not quite herself." He left, his face a mask of professional politeness that didn't quite hide his discomfort. As his car crunched down the gravel driveway, Jenna turned to me. The concern in her eyes looked chillingly real. "Elara, I'm worried about you," she said, her voice a low, serious hum. "This is getting worse. Forgetting appointments, losing things, imagining conversations. Maybe we should talk to someone. A doctor." I backed away from her, the polished floor cold beneath my feet. The house, my sanctuary, my place of comfort, suddenly felt like a trap. The walls seemed to be closing in, the air growing thin. The scent of her perfume was overpowering, suffocating. "There's nothing wrong with me, Jenna." "Of course there isn't, honey," she cooed, advancing on me slowly. "But you're hurting. You're confused. We just need to get you some help. It's what Grandma Rose would have wanted. That was her trump card, invoking our grandmother. She knew it would silence me, fill me with a fresh wave of grief and guilt. And it worked. I retreated into myself, into a fog of doubt. Was she right? Was grief actually unhinging me? I started to question everything. The feel of the jewelry box in my hands, the sound of Mr. Henderson's voice on the phone, the sight of my own handwriting on the calendar. My own senses were becoming unreliable witnesses in the trial of my sanity, and Jenna was the star prosecutor. The next few weeks were a blur of subtle torment. She started talking to other family members on the phone. I would walk into a room, and she would hang up quickly, offering me a bright, false smile. Her conversations were always hushed, but I could hear snippets, little poison darts dipped in concern. Words like delusional, unstable, and breakdown drifted through the heavy air of the old house. My Aunt Carol called, her voice tight with a nervous energy I'd never heard from her before. "Elara, honey, are you eating properly? Jenna says you've barely touched your food." It was a lie. I was eating. But Jenna had started serving me smaller and smaller portions, then throwing the rest away, so it looked like I was just picking at my meals. My Uncle Mark stopped by, his big, friendly face etched with worry. "Your cousin told me you were up all night, wandering the halls, talking to yourself," he said, his hand on my shoulder feeling impossibly heavy. "Are you getting any sleep, kiddo?" I had been sleeping, but Jenna had woken me up twice in one night, claiming she'd heard me crying out, making me so disoriented and groggy that I probably looked like I hadn't slept in a week. Every act of self-expression became a symptom. I was a painter. It was my passion, my career. I had a small studio set up in the sunroom, the air always smelling of turpentine and linseed oil. It was my one remaining sanctuary. One afternoon, I was working on a landscape, a memory of a field of wildflowers Grandma and I had visited years ago. I was trying to capture the feeling of the wind, the impossible, vibrant purple of the lupins. Jenna came in, her presence immediately chilling the warm, sun-drenched air. She stood behind me for a long moment, the silence stretching and tightening. "What is that?" she finally asked, her voice carefully neutral. "It's the field by Miller's Creek," I said, not turning around, focusing on the texture of the paint on the canvas. "It's very chaotic, isn't it?" she said. "All those frantic colors. The sky looks so angry. Are you feeling angry, Elara?" I stopped painting, my brush hovering over the canvas. I looked at my work. I saw vibrant life, a joyful memory. She saw chaos and anger. She was reinterpreting my entire world, my very soul, through her distorted lens of my supposed instability. "It's just a painting, Jenna." "Of course," she said quickly. "Of course it is. It's just a little concerning. Dr. Evans said that sometimes people in your condition express their inner turmoil through their art." "Dr. Evans? Who is Dr. Evans?" My blood ran cold. The smell of the paint suddenly seemed acrid and sharp in my nostrils. "He's a friend," she said vaguely, waving a dismissive hand. "A psychiatrist. I was just asking for some advice on how best to support you." She had been talking to a psychiatrist about me. Behind my back, building a case. The brush slipped from my fingers, clattering onto the floor and leaving a streak of violent cadmium yellow on the old wooden planks. The trap was no longer just a feeling. It was real. It had a name, and its jaws were closing around me. The family dinner was Jenna's idea. She called it a get-together, a chance for all of us to connect and support each other during this difficult time. In reality, it was my trial, and she had already appointed herself judge, jury, and executioner. The dining room was formally set. The long mahogany table gleamed under the light of the chandelier, reflecting the flickering flames of a dozen tapered candles. The air was thick with the rich, savory smell of roast beef and the earthy aroma of roasted vegetables. The sounds were a carefully orchestrated symphony of family life. The clink of silverware against porcelain, the low murmur of conversation, the occasional burst of laughter that sounded brittle and forced. I felt like I was underwater. The sounds were distorted, the faces of my aunts and uncles and cousins swimming before my eyes. Everyone was being so careful with me, their words soft, their glances full of a terrible, misplaced pity. They'd ask me a question, and before I could even formulate a response, Jenna would jump in, answering for me. "Elara is feeling a little overwhelmed today, aren't you, sweetie?" she'd say, patting my hand. "She didn't get much sleep last night." When my Uncle Mark asked about my latest art commission, Jenna sighed dramatically. "Oh, she's had to put her work on hold for a little while. It's just too much for her to handle right now. Her last piece was, well, it was very dark. We're encouraging her to rest." I could feel my own voice being erased, my own identity being painted over with her narrative of a fragile, broken woman. The roast beef on my plate tasted like ash. The wine in my glass felt like acid. The warmth of the room was suffocating. I felt a scream building in my chest, a hot, desperate thing. I had to say something. I had to fight back. I waited for a lull in the conversation, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I took a breath, the air smelling of candle wax and perfume. "Jenna has been lying to you," I said, my voice coming out louder and shakier than I intended. The clinking of forks stopped. Every eye in the room swiveled to me. The silence that fell was absolute, heavy as a shroud. Jenna looked at me, her eyes wide with what looked like shock and hurt. It was a masterful performance. "Ilara, what are you talking about?" "The jewelry box," I said, my voice gaining a bit of strength. "The appraiser. The calendar. You've been moving things, hiding things, making me think I'm losing my mind." A collective, uncomfortable shifting sound went around the table. My Aunt Carol wouldn't meet my eyes, focusing intently on folding her napkin into a perfect square. "Honey," Jenna said, her voice dripping with sorrowful pity. "You know that's not true. Why would you say something so hurtful?" "Because it is true." My voice cracked. I looked around the table, at the faces of the people who were supposed to love me, to protect me. I saw doubt. I saw fear. I saw them choosing to believe the easier story, the one presented by the calm, capable, sane-looking Jenna. "She's trying to make you all think I'm crazy. I think she wants the house. The will says we have to agree on what to do with it, and if I'm declared incompetent." A horrified gasp came from my aunt. Jenna's eyes filled with tears, her lower lip trembling. "That's a monstrous thing to say," she whispered, her voice breaking. "After everything I've done to take care of you. I've put my own life on hold to be here, to help you through your grief, and this is how you repay me. With these paranoid fantasies?" The words paranoid fantasies landed like a physical blow. She had won. I could see it in their faces. I was the hysterical, grieving, unstable one. She was the patient, long-suffering caregiver. I had played right into her hands. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping harshly against the wooden floor. The sound was violent in the thick silence. "I need some air," I mumbled and fled the room, the scent of her victory following me down the hall. I ran up the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous old house. I didn't stop until I was in my grandmother's bedroom, my sanctuary within a sanctuary. I slammed the door shut, the sound a satisfying boom, and leaned against it, my body shaking with a mixture of rage and despair. The room smelled of her, of lavender and old books and the faint, powdery scent of her face cream. It was the only place left that felt safe. I sank onto the floor, pulling my knees to my chest, and finally let the sobs come, hot, ragged tears that felt like they were being torn from my soul. I was utterly and completely alone. I don't know how long I stayed there, curled up on the floor, the pattern of the oriental rug pressing into my cheek. The sounds of the dinner party downstairs eventually faded, replaced by the low hum of the house settling for the night. The anger and despair had burned themselves out, leaving behind a cold, hollow emptiness. But in that emptiness, a tiny, hard ember of resolve began to glow. I was not crazy. I knew I wasn't. Jenna was doing this to me, and I had to find a way to prove it. But how? It was my word against hers, and she had spent weeks methodically discrediting me. My gaze drifted around the room, landing on the large, roll-top desk in the corner. It was a place I had avoided, a place too intimately connected to Grandma. It was where she paid her bills, wrote her letters, and managed the details of her life. My heart ached, but the new, cold resolve pushed me to my feet. I walked over and sat in her chair, the worn leather cool against my skin. The air here was even more concentrated with her scent. I ran my hand over the smooth, curved top of the desk. What was I even looking for? A clue? A sign? It felt hopeless. My fingers fumbled with the latch, and with a low, wooden groan, I rolled the top back. The neat, organized world of my grandmother was revealed. Pigeons' holes filled with envelopes, a brass and marble pen set, a small, silver letter opener. It was all exactly as she had left it. I started opening the small drawers, one by one. Old stamps, paper clips, a collection of beautiful and used fountain pens. Nothing. I was about to give up when my hand brushed against the underside of the main desk compartment. My fingers found a small, almost invisible indentation in the wood. A hidden button. My breath caught. I pressed it. With a soft click, a thin, flat section of the desk's floor popped up. It was a secret compartment. My hands trembled as I reached inside. My fingers closed around a book. It wasn't a book, it was a journal. It was bound in dark green leather, soft and supple with age, the cover completely plain. I lifted it out. It smelled of leather and thyme, and my grandmother's faint, lavender and paper scent. I opened it to the first page. The date was written in her elegant, familiar script, from just over a year ago. I started to read. For the first 50 pages, it was what I expected. Notes about her garden, comments on books she had read, little observations about the weather. But then, Jenna's name began to appear more frequently. Jenna came to visit today, one entry read. She is so charming, so polished. But sometimes, when she thinks I'm not looking, I see a hardness in her eyes. A cold, calculating look. It vanishes as soon as I turn, but it unnerves me. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I kept reading, my eyes flying across the pages. My grandmother, so sharp, so perceptive, had seen it. She had seen the truth of Jenna long before I had. Another entry, a few weeks later. Jenna asked me about my will again today. The third time this month. She was casual about it, but there was an intensity there, a hunger. She kept talking about how much this house meant to her, how she would take such good care of it. She worries me. She is a cuckoo in the nest. She smiles so sweetly while she pushes the other birds out. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the journal steady. There it was. My grandmother had seen her for what she was. I flipped through the pages, my heart pounding, and then I found the entry that made the air leave my lungs in a whoosh. It was dated just 2 months before she passed away. I have made a small change to my affairs. A little insurance policy for Alara. My dear, sweet Alara. She sees the world with the heart of an artist, full of light and beauty. She does not see the shadows in people the way I do. I fear Jenna will try to take advantage of her kindness, of her sensitive nature, especially when I am gone. I fear she will try to take everything. I have left this journal for Alara. But I have also done something else. Something only Alara will understand. My final painting, the one I keep in the safe. The key is in my locket. The painting is her proof. It is her truth. I hope she never needs it, but I fear she will. The locket. The silver locket that Jenna had hidden from me. The first shot fired in her silent, vicious war. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a key. I scrambled to my feet, my mind racing. I ran to my own room, to the small wooden box where I now kept the locket. My fingers were clumsy as I worked the tiny clasp. It sprang open. The locket had 2 sides, meant for tiny photographs. On one side was a faded picture of my grandfather. On the other, a picture of me as a child. I remembered my grandmother putting it there. But now my fingers searched behind the photo of me. There was a tiny piece of metal tucked into the frame. Not a key. A very, very small memory card. An SD card. My grandmother, who could barely work her television remote, had hidden an SD card in her locket. It was brilliant. It was so completely unexpected, Jenna would never have even thought to look. I felt a surge of love and awe for the incredible woman who had raised me. Even from beyond the grave, she was protecting me. I didn't have a computer in my room. The main one was downstairs, in the study. I would have to be quiet. I slipped out of the room, the journal clutched in one hand, the tiny memory card safe in the palm of the other. The house was dark and silent. I crept down the main staircase, each creak of the old wood sounding like a gunshot in the stillness. The air was cool on my face. I made it to the study. The room smelled of old leather and furniture polish. I left the lights off, the glow from the computer monitor, my only illumination, as it booted up. My heart hammered in my chest. I slid the SD card into the slot. A window popped up. There was one file on it. A video file. I clicked on it. The video flickered to life. It was my grandmother, sitting in her armchair, the one I had been sitting in just days ago. The lighting was from the lamp beside her, casting a warm, soft glow. She looked tired, but her eyes were clear and sharp. She was looking directly into the camera. "Hello, my darling Alara," she said, her voice, her real voice, filling the silent room. Tears immediately sprang to my eyes. "If you are watching this, it means I was right to be worried. And for that, I am so sorry. I want you to listen to me very carefully. This house, this land, it is not just property. It is our history. It is our family's heart. And it must be protected by someone who understands that. That person is you." She took a breath. "Jenna does not have a good heart. She is clever, and she is charming, but she is hollow inside. She will try to trick you. She will try to make you doubt yourself. Do not let her. You are strong, my love. You are stronger than you know. Your heart is your strength, not your weakness." Then the camera angle shifted slightly. It panned to the side. and Jenna walked into the frame. She clearly had no idea she was being recorded. "Grandma, are you just talking to yourself again?" Jenna's voice was filled with that cloying, false sweetness. "Just sorting through some memories, dear," my grandmother said calmly. "Well, you really should let me help you sort through your finances," Jenna said, her tone becoming businesslike. "This house is so big. The taxes must be a fortune. If you just signed it over to me now, I could manage everything for you. It would be so much less for you to worry about in your old age. We wouldn't want you getting confused and making a mistake with the paperwork, would we?" My grandmother just smiled a small, sad smile. "Thank you for the offer, dear. I'll think about it." The video ended. It was everything. It was the proof. It showed Jenna's motive, her manipulative nature, her condescending, gaslighting tone. It was undeniable. I saved a copy to the computer's hard drive, and then another to a small USB drive I found in a desk drawer. I felt a wave of profound relief wash over me, so powerful it almost made my knees buckle. The fight wasn't over. But now I had a weapon. The next morning, I came downstairs to find Jenna in the kitchen, humming to herself as she made coffee. The cheerful, domestic scene was so grotesquely at odds with the truth of who she was, it made my stomach turn. The rich, bitter smell of the coffee brewing filled the air. She turned and gave me her bright, patronizing smile. "Good morning, sleepyhead. Did you have a good rest? You were so emotional last night." I was worried sick. I didn't say anything. I just walked over to the kitchen table and sat down, placing the leather-bound journal on the placemat in front of me. Her eyes flickered to the journal. A tiny, almost imperceptible frown line appeared between her perfectly sculpted eyebrows. "What's that?" "Grandma's journal," I said, my voice quiet but steady. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. "I found it last night. She wrote a lot about you, Jenna." The color drained from her face. Her smile vanished, replaced by a tight, thin line. "Don't be ridiculous. Grandma never kept a diary." "Oh, she did," I said, opening it to one of the pages I had marked. "She writes here about how you kept pressuring her about the will, about how she saw a cold, calculating look in your eyes. She called you a cuckoo in the nest." Jenna let out a short, sharp laugh, but it was a brittle, ugly sound. She was an old woman. She was probably getting senile. You can't believe the ramblings of a dying person. "She seemed perfectly lucid to me," I said, my gaze unwavering. "Especially on this video." I slid my phone across the table. I had transferred the file. I pressed play. Our grandmother's voice filled the kitchen, clear and strong. Jenna stared at the screen, her face a mask of horror as she watched herself, heard her own wheedling, manipulative words. The cozy kitchen atmosphere evaporated, replaced by a silence so thick and cold it felt like a physical weight. When the video ended, she looked up at me. The mask was gone. For the first time, I saw the real Jenna. Her eyes were no longer full of fake concern. They were cold, flat, and full of a pure reptilian hatred. "You think this changes anything?" she hissed, her voice a low, venomous whisper. "It's your word against mine. You, the unstable, grieving artist, or me, the responsible one who has been taking care of everything? Who do you think they'll believe?" "I think," I said, standing up, my chair making a soft scrape on the floor, "that you should pack your bags." That afternoon, I called another family meeting. Not a dinner party this time, but a formal gathering in the living room. I didn't give them details, only that it was urgent. They arrived looking nervous and worried, their eyes darting towards me as if I might shatter at any moment. Jenna was there, of course. She had put her mask back on, playing the part of the concerned cousin, forced to attend this meeting called by her troubled relative. She sat on the sofa, a picture of grace and composure. I stood before them, by the fireplace, the cold marble of the mantelpiece at my back. The air was tense, smelling of old wood and the faint, nervous perfume of my Aunt Carol. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I told them everything, my voice calm and even. I told them about the gaslighting, the moved objects, the lies. I described the calculated campaign Jenna had waged against my sanity. As I spoke, Jenna interrupted, sighing, shaking her head, murmuring things like, "Oh, you poor, confused thing. And this is exactly what Dr. Evans was worried about." My family looked from me to her, their expressions a painful mix of confusion and pity. I could see them wavering. "I know this is hard to believe," I said, my voice steady. "Jenna has been very convincing. So I brought proof. I read to them from the journal. I read our grandmother's words, her fears, her precise and damning observations of Jenna's character. The room grew silent as the elegant, Familiar script brought Grandma Rose back to life, her voice echoing through the pages. Jenna's face was pale, her composure beginning to crack at the edges. "Those are just words," she snapped, her voice higher than usual. She was old. She didn't know what she was writing. "Then maybe you'll believe her voice," I said. I turned on the television and played the video. I had it ready to go. The large screen made the scene even more powerful. There was our grandmother, vibrant and clear-eyed. And there was Jenna, her face a mask of greed, her voice a toxic blend of condescension and manipulation. The effect on the room was instantaneous. It was like a spell had been broken. The collective gasp was audible. My Uncle Mark's face hardened into a mask of cold fury. My Aunt Carol's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horrified understanding. They weren't looking at me with pity anymore. They were looking at Jenna with revulsion. The truth, once revealed, was ugly and undeniable. Jenna didn't even try to defend herself. She just stood up, her body rigid, her face contorted with rage. She shot me a look of pure, undiluted hatred, a look that promised a lifetime of enmity. Then she turned and walked out of the house, slamming the heavy front door behind her, the sound echoing like a final, bitter judgment. The silence she left behind was profound. It was filled with the shame and regret of my family. The apologies came, one after another, stumbling and heartfelt. I accepted them, but something had broken between us, a trust that could never be fully repaired. They had been so quick to believe I was broken, so willing to accept her lies. In the end, I got the house. The will was clear, and with Jenna gone, there was no one to contest it. The family left, one by one, leaving me alone in the vast, quiet space. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel heavy or oppressive. It felt peaceful. It felt like mine. I walked through the rooms, my hand trailing along the lemon-scented furniture. The air no longer felt like a trap. The shadows were just shadows. I went into my studio and picked up my paintbrush. The familiar weight of it in my hand was a comfort. The smell of the paint was the smell of my own life, my own mind, my own truth. I looked at the unfinished canvas, the one Jenna had called chaotic and angry. I saw a field of wildflowers, vibrant and strong, bending in the wind but not breaking. And I began to paint.